right, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this latest in a series of SharePoint embedded webinars. Today, we're going to talk about how to do AI-powered apps using SharePoint Embedded. You're going to see a bunch of email addresses and links across the screen. Don't worry, this is being recorded. You'll be able to get those later, and we'll also put them into the commentary for the show so you can keep track of everything. My name is Reed Carlberg. I am very excited to be here with you this morning, and I'm also very excited about our team of presenters. We got a great show for you today. I'm a principal product manager at Microsoft, and I've been working with SharePoint Embedded for the last almost 3 years now, talking with customers about what it should do and helping developers understand how to harness it. So I'll be kicking things off, and then Steve Pucelik will be helping out a little bit later. Steve, do you want to say hello?
You bet. Thanks, Reed. Again, I'm Steve Pucelik, product manager on the SharePoint Embedded team. Been working alongside Reed for quite a bit now, but also in the SharePoint space for, oh boy, 20 plus years. So glad to be here.
And our Delaware team, who is joining us for a great demo today. Vincent, you want to kick it off?
Yes, I'm Vincent Boer, Chief Technology Officer at Delaware Netherlands, working now with SharePoint Embedded for the last year with our customers. I'm very excited about what we're showing today.
Yeah. So my name is Gideon. I'm a technical consultant at Delaware, and I've been working for the last couple of years, actually, with various solutions implementing SharePoint Embedded. Patrick.
Yes, thanks, Gideon. My name is Patrick van Leefsig, also a technical consultant at Delaware. And the past year, lots of experience with SharePoint Embedded for various of our customers. Really excited to show what we've got to show today.
Awesome. Well, I will go ahead and invite everybody to kind of go off camera as I kick off the introduction here. And don't worry, they'll all be back in a minute. So I want to start off with this core statement of just fact. And I think if you're out there working with any type of custom development, you're building apps as an ISV, or you're building line of business apps, you know that this change is happening in real time, very rapidly all around us. Every app really is an AI app today. Enterprises are intent on driving both efficiency and quality with AI. And you will see this both in existing apps, apps which are content heavy that people want to make better by adding AI to it, and brand new greenfield AI first native apps. Enterprises, though, they have a whole unique set of concerns when they're doing anything with data, and this extends through to AI apps as well. They have complex security and compliance requirements that really are an important part of every app you build. Now, SharePoint Embedded is a platform that's built for exactly this style of use case, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So our roadmap looks a little bit like this. I'm going to kick off by introducing SharePoint Embedded. So I've got a few slides I'm going to walk you through that talks about some of the technical capabilities and innovation. Then the team over at Delaware, they're going to walk through this common use case that we've been seeing and that they've had a chance to work on. It's a document collaboration portal with AI built right in. They have a great demo, and they're going to discuss some lessons that they've learned along the way. And then Steve is going to come back in and talk about how you too can get started with SharePoint Embedded. Now, along the way, you can post questions into the chat, and Steve is going to be monitoring those in real time while I'm going through the slides. And anything that we don't get to real time, don't worry, we'll get to it at the end and make sure that your questions are answered. Now, the thing that I really want to make sure that you all know is that SharePoint Embedded Copilot, the preview that we announced a little while ago, it's now self-service opt-in. So this is a React-based chat control, and it is one of the best ways to see Microsoft 365 Copilot in action with SharePoint Embedded. And so if you head over to this URL, the aka.ms/start-spe-copilot, you're going to get all of the instructions for how you too can engage with this preview. It really is pretty cool. Now, let's talk a little bit about SharePoint Embedded. SharePoint Embedded is relatively new. We're at just about a year old since we hit generally available status. And it is a great way for you to embed Microsoft 365 features in whatever app you're building. And it's an Azure service. So the way to think about this is it is an API-only version of SharePoint specifically designed for apps. It gives you access to M365 Copilot, collaboration, security, and compliance capabilities. And again, these are all consumptive APIs now powered by Graph, and they include all of the Microsoft 365 business continuity promises that you're used to. Now, what we're going to talk about next is this core innovation around this partition, because how it stores data is very important. It actually stores this data right in your M365 tenant, and that's how it's able to deliver all of these great capabilities to whatever app you're building, whether that's an ISV app or line of business app. Now, I want to double down on this question of what SPE is, because it really is one of those things which is very important for you to ground on. SPE is optimized for document management in apps. And you notice here I have a comparison of SharePoint Online versus SharePoint Embedded, because there's a lot of commonalities and there are a lot of things which are different. So first of all, both SharePoint Online and SharePoint Embedded are hyperscale document management systems. Our customers around the world upload more than 2.7 billion new documents every single day into this service. So it doesn't get much more hyperscale than that. And when you're using SharePoint Embedded, you're using that exact same document management platform. Now, both systems also give you native access to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and more than 300 file types of preview as part of the services. And so that's something that's included in both SharePoint Online and SharePoint Embedded. This is where it starts to get a little different. SharePoint Embedded is optimized for apps, and so the files and documents actually go into a very lightweight document container. It is designed to have deterministic security, and we'll talk more about that in just a second, so that you can know exactly who has access to the documents in that container at all times. Now, when you think about SharePoint Online has these great features that are part of it. So you have these built-in user experiences that are part of it. You can manage your websites if you're building an intranet or a department site. And you can also manage data stored in lists. Now, because SharePoint Embedded is optimized for document management, it doesn't include a built-in user experience. You cannot manage websites with it. It does not store data in lists. It really is designed to be a high-performance, lightweight document management platform for apps. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff which is a little bit different here too, and we'll talk more about this as we go. As I said, this is a metered Azure service, and one of the things that's very important to note, if you are someone who has done development on SharePoint Online, you're used to a certain amount of resource allocation for your API calls. Because SharePoint Embedded is optimized for apps, what we've done is we've put our default resource limitation at 2 times the largest entitlement that you can get on SharePoint Online. And that's actually a soft number. And so if you are somebody who has a high transaction app and you need to work with documents all over the place in a very high transaction manner, SharePoint Embedded is the path for you. Okay, with that, let's talk a little bit about the AI portion, because this is one of the reasons, of course, that we're all here today. Now, we've been talking a little bit about how you can build apps, but I want to back up and I want to talk about how Microsoft builds apps for just a second. Microsoft has come out with a large number of new AI-first, AI-forward apps in the last year and a half. So think about Loop agents, Copilot pages, things to do with Microsoft Designer. All of those experiences are backed by SharePoint Embedded. And so when you choose to use SharePoint Embedded, you're actually using the exact same system that Microsoft uses to deliver our own hyperscale services. And we think about all the same things that we just talked about. We need to have all of the security and compliance and collaboration and AI as part of these apps. And SharePoint Embedded is optimized for those. So when you think about it, what you want to think is that we have these AI-ready containers. The idea is that it gives you an app-scoped version of AI. It's permission-aware, so it only works with documents that the current user has access to. And it includes all of the semantic index that you know and love. The best thing about how SharePoint Embedded is engineered is as data comes into it, it goes through a very deterministic similar flow to what you're going to see across Microsoft. So a document comes in, it gets lexically indexed, it gets semantically indexed, it is security trimmed so that people know, so that you know you can only get to the documents you have access to. And that forms the foundation for all of these apps. All the while, your data is actually staying inside your M365 compliance boundary. Okay. Now, I talked a little bit about the fact that this is a great way to deliver M365 features via your app. And we've been talking about AI and Copilot here for just a second, but I want to switch gears and I want to talk about collaboration. One of the main reasons that people come to SharePoint Embedded is to drive collaboration on documents that are stored as part of an app. And so think about your Word, Excel, and your PowerPoint documents. With SharePoint Embedded, you get one-click access to true native co-authoring and collaboration capabilities. So this includes everything from presence indicators to app mentions and sharing to both internal and external users. It also includes full desktop client support so that you could use Word, Excel, or PowerPoint to go ahead and actually edit and co-author on files in real time with whoever you need to. Now, we also include preview capability for more than 300 file types. And so if you want to preview a PDF, dead easy in SharePoint Embedded. If you want to preview something which is like a DICOM file, or you have a video, or you have an image, or you have like a CAD drawing, all of those file formats are supported in some way through this previewer. And so you have a lot of flexibility about how that works. Best of all, you don't have to develop it yourself. Now, on the compliance front, we've talked a lot about how data stays inside your M365 compliance boundary. And what that means is that your compliance settings flow through to data which is stored in SharePoint Embedded. So if you're an organization who has invested in E3 or E5 licenses and some purview features, things like data loss prevention, bring your own key, retention policies and sensitivity labels, all of those flow through into the data which is stored as part of SharePoint Embedded. So this really is a very powerful way to deliver document management capabilities as part of any app. So whether you're looking for AI or you're looking for compliance or collaboration, all of those capabilities flow through. And I didn't even really talk about kind of the core storage capabilities because, you know, a lot of this is just kind of table stakes. But when you think about what it's like to manage large files, for example, SharePoint Embedded as part of kind of the SharePoint family, we already know how to do that really well. Metadata, same thing. And all of this now flows through to your app. So let's talk about how that actually comes together. Now, the core innovation that we want to talk about is this notion of partitioning in SharePoint. So if you think about kind of an M365 tenant, it looks a little bit like this conceptually, right? This is obviously a very simplified view. You have a tenant boundary, and within that boundary, everything is configured to behave a certain way. And you also then have these features which run all the way across, like the Microsoft 365 storage platform, for example. Already today, we can partition that so that you have unique storage areas that behave differently based on what app is working with them. Best example, SharePoint and OneDrive. What we're introducing is the ability for you to create your own partition inside that storage platform. And so when you're building an app, and this is true again, whether you are an ISV installing apps inside your customer's tenant, or a line of business or an enterprise building line of business apps, which you want to store data inside your tenant, you can create your own dedicated partition that is just for your app. Now, let's talk a little bit about what lives in that partition, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how the security is set up. Now, what lives in that partition are things called SharePoint embedded containers. So remember in the beginning when I said that SharePoint embedded includes lightweight, high-performance document management containers? This is what I'm talking about. It's a brand new document management primitive. It's designed to be instantiated and managed in real time via your app, and they're highly scalable. Our default guidelines are that you have no more than 100,000 of these per app per tenant, but that's just a guideline. We've actually had a lot of customers, especially in the enterprise space, tell us that they want to have a few 100,000, or we have a couple of customers who are asking us for a few million. And all of this is possible with SharePoint Embedded. The way to think about containers is that containers need to map to some kind of business construct. And so a core thing that Delaware is going to talk a little bit about is container architecture. When you think about building a SharePoint embedded system, you have to consider when you want a new container and when you want to reuse an existing container. And the best way to draw that line is how your business is set up. So if you are working with legal matters, a matter is a great example of a use case for a container. If you're working in a project-based environment, a project can be a container. Now, you get the idea. The idea then is that not only is this a scale unit, it's also a security boundary. By default, only the person who created that container has access to it. Now, it's very easy then at the container level to add additional people to different roles. We have 4 different roles, and I think Steve is going to spend a little bit of time talking about those as he talks about getting started. But the idea is that you can say, this person owns the container and can do everything, or they've got some subset of rights. Now, if you need more granular security, you can actually add a user to a file within that container, and they can only access that file. That is a very standard option for you. Now, importantly, you actually have management of these containers inside the SharePoint Admin Center. If you've been there lately, you'll see that there's a section which talks about active containers and deleted containers, and it shows the app that it's tied to. And of course, we also have role-based access control, making it easy for you to secure who can work with what SharePoint embedded containers. Now, while we're talking a little bit about how apps control their containers, I want to talk a little bit about how the security is set up. So in general, the way that this works is when an app, we'll use Microsoft Loop as an example, when an app goes ahead and instantiates a container, it's the only app that has access to those containers. And so, for example, if you have app 1, which we're using as Microsoft Loop, and app 2, maybe that's a line of business app, in both those cases, those apps control all the containers. And when I say control, I mean they can instantiate the containers, they can archive containers, they can delete containers, they can garbage collect containers. All of that is up to the app. Now, the best part about that as an app developer is that you can be confident that whatever experience you're developing in your app, you know that experience is going to be managed 100% by your app. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about this M365 experience integration because there's some really exciting things here. First, as I said before, you do have full Office, web, and desktop support, and you get co-authoring and collaboration out of the box. Now, you will also notice that as you're doing something with a SharePoint embedded managed document in Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, you actually have this app branding. And so if you look over here on the right-hand side, you'll see where there's this notion of a location, and you can have a logo and an app name and everything else. Pretty special. You also, of course, have the option to surface the files and documents that you're managing as part of your app inside the M365 discovery systems. Now, this is an option. You can also turn it off if that's more important to you. I mentioned before we have this embeddable file and document previewer so that you can preview more than 300 file types. And you also have highly configurable sharing. And this is a separate configuration from what you would have on the SharePoint Online front, so that you can share exactly what you need to with external users inside your SharePoint embedded powered application. Now, very uniquely, if you are sharing with an external user who does not have a Word, Excel, or PowerPoint license, when you share with them and you're working with them on a document, SharePoint Embedded actually includes access to Word, Excel, and PowerPoint as part of this for your external users. So you can be confident that when you share something with someone, they will be able to access it no matter what their licensing situation is with Microsoft 365. Now, there's a ton more that we could go into, but I want to actually leave some of that for a little bit later into discussion. And I want to end with what we're doing here on the Purview integration. So if you haven't had a chance to use and get deep into some of the Purview tools, they're really exciting. There's a unified audit, there's e-discovery, there's all, of course, the sensitivity labels. All of these are supported by SharePoint Embedded. If you are using SharePoint Embedded to manage documents, you can use all of these with whatever Purview configuration you have. And so again, if you're an E3 or E5 licensee and you have advanced features like data loss prevention, bring your own key, retention policies, multi-geo, et cetera, those flow through as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and invite the Delaware team to come back on camera. There we go. Hello, gentlemen. Oh, we got a big conference room. Oh. This is great.
Yes,
okay.
There we are. Yes.
So right. That is the introductory remarks about what SharePoint Embedded is. I want to turn it over to the Delaware team because they've been doing a bunch of work and they have an example they're going to walk through. Guillaume, you want to take it away?
I can certainly talk through it. So, okay, thank you very much, Reed. So what we actually have right here is a portal for Boulder Innovations. And Boulder Innovations, fictional company that is responsible for the research and development for new renewable energy technologies. Basically what they do is they need their research and actually build plans for the new solutions. And they actually need external contractors for this, which are actually, of course, going to build the plants and locations. What is required for this to happen is a lot of documentation. So you have need project plans, for example, and they actually need to be reviewed back and forth between actually the Boulder project manager and external contractors. And they have a portal for that, right, Patrick?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Gideon. So Boulder Innovation actually specifically chose for SharePoint Embedded because of its many security and compliancy features, and because one of the hard requirements was that all of the documents must contractor. So the use case that we're going to play out is that Boulder got a green light to actually develop a new solar panel park in Florida. Yeah. And they have a project plan for it, they have the cost calculated, and they have an external contractor that wants to realize it, right? Yeah, exactly, Gideon. And whilst you were explaining that, we actually did something really cool, and that was signed in through the Graph Toolkit.
Right.
So when we have this page open, this is the page specifically for Boulder Innovation employees, which means that they have access to all of the files. However, if you look at the Energy Innovation Research and Development project, that hasn't been published yet, which means that it is not available to any external user, and it only becomes available the moment a Boulder employee explicitly chooses to publish them.
Right. So, okay. So very curious about those documents, so let's create a new project then.
Yeah, exactly. So let's create this project. So the Florida Solar Park project.
Yeah, I see. And now it's actually creating a new project. And actually, this project is a container that Reed was talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So every project is its own container, because if you've got dozens of projects where dozens of people are working on, you have the possibility of limiting your throughput, right?
Right.
So to circumvent that, every single project is its own container.
Right. Okay.
So let's add some files.
Yes.
We've prepared some for this already.
And now it's going to upload the file to the container.
Exactly. And as you can see, there's already some very powerful feature from SharePoint Embedded is the possibility of embedding your documents. So we have a real life view of what the content is.
Hey, and through this preview, I can also see actually a little mistake over there. You still need to fill in your name to the project proposal, I see.
Exactly. So we can natively go through and edit this in Word Online, which I'll just edit my name really quickly.
Okay.
And when you save this and go back to the to the application and reload this page,
Mm-hmm.
you will see that the changes are immediately reflected in the embed.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. I'm really curious about this document, so please publish them to me.
Yeah, so again, these files are only available to employees of all innovation.
Yeah.
The moment that you explicitly publish them, they will become available to outside contractors.
Right. Right. So now you publish them basically, yeah?
Yep.
And now actually, because it is a published version, it should be available for me to see.
Yeah, exactly. So let's switch accounts.
Let's take a look over there. I'm also going to do a little refresh over here.
Yeah.
And now basically, indeed, we will be able to see the project of the solar park panel.
There it is.
Solar panel park, excuse me. So when we enter this project, I see all the files that you shared with me.
Exactly, yeah.
So I will be able to see them as well. And if I click view over here, I will be able to view actually the document. But as I see, I don't have edit access to this. I only have read access.
Yeah, that's explicitly chosen. So
Yeah.
we do not want external contractors to be able to edit any documents because that could influence the integrity of them.
Yeah, so indeed, actually the application here itself decides who gets write access and who gets read access.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Hey, let's check for a second the total cost of this solar panel park. So I see something, by the way.
Yeah.
I have a small question to you. We have this other project actually that we're working on, which is indeed the hydro power plant.
Yeah.
So, can you maybe give me the total cost of that, because I have a small idea.
Yeah, of course. Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah.
The hydro plant.
The hydro power station, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm actually feeling a little bit lazy right now, and I do not want to go through all of those documents. So
Typical developer. Yeah.
why don't we ask Copilot?
All right. And basically the question that you're asking Copilot here right now, Copilot is going to go through all the files of this project.
Yeah, more specifically, only the files which are in this version of the container.
Oh, okay. Right.
So, as you can see, we have the project cost of between 5.5 and 5.6 million.
Right. I see indeed that between the actual cost and the estimated cost, there's 200,000 over budget.
Yeah.
But I have a small idea. So can we go back indeed to the solar panel park?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So for a fact, me as a contractor, I actually know a supplier that can give me a huge discount on the solar panels. So
Okay.
I think I can get that 200K actually off because of a frank discount, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's edit. So we'll go to detail cost, edit the file the same way we did the World Online file.
Okay.
What will be the new price?
100,000. I think I'll be able to negotiate that.
Okay. So again, save this. And let's increase the version this time because obviously we made a change.
Yeah, sure.
And one of the powerful possibilities is that with a version change, you can create a copy of the previous version. So should this be wrong, we can always roll back to the previous one.
Right.
So we will still, of course, need to publish this so it's visible to you. Otherwise, you will not see any of these changes.
Yeah, makes sense because you have a concept at first, which you're going to publish with me.
Exactly.
Okay, now it's to version 2.0. So let's see indeed if I will be able to view that. If I go back and I refresh the page for a moment, will it indeed arrive? Let's check the version. So version 2.0 is there.
Exactly.
I can open it. And if I'm not mistaken, if I can check around, it will actually show the cost. All right, perfect. It's 100K now, so we're set to go. Let's build that plant, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
Great. So, Reed, we also have actually a couple of lessons learned that we want to talk about. So
I'll bring this up. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, please. Yes. Yeah, great. So basically, I have been working actually for the past years indeed with SharePoint Embedded for a big client as well. You have been working on this demo app, so you also have a bit of the grasp of it. Basically, what I want the number one lessons learned that I've learned during working with SharePoint Embedded is actually the container strategy.
Yeah.
So we actually had a pretty big piece of software where we that had a very big user base, and basically what we did at first was putting all the files into one container, separated through all folders. Now, we quickly came to notice that is going to cost a lot of performance. Therefore, we came up with a new container strategy, which was indeed, as Reed explained, various containers for multiple data packages. And that worked out perfectly fine. The only thing is, of course, please, it's not one size fits all solution, because it will also cost a bit more maintenance. So please, when you build an app with SharePoint Embedded, think about your container strategy and make sure that you design so that your app will be using the most out of it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And one really surprising nice thing is that if you've already got experience with SharePoint Online, it's actually really easy to get started with SharePoint Embedded because, well, the graph calls are the same, right? So it's really nice.
Yeah, certainly. I experienced the same thing. And the last thing to note, indeed, is that I really come to realize how easy this is for both independent software vendors, ISVs, and actually enterprises at the same time. Because if you are an ISV and you build an application, you're able to make the user sign in and upload files which will be stored in their own tenant, into their own environment with their own set of rules. They have their security rules, they have their Microsoft purview for compliancy, and of course they have their intra ID, which always have their separate set of rules. On the same time, you also, of course, have enterprises itself, and what they're able to do is exactly what we demoed just now, is exposing documents to external users and letting those external users sign in with their Microsoft account and actually viewing them without any hassle. So these two sides, I think, really benefit both of it.
So, first, this is a great demo, and I want to just say congratulations because I know you've been working on this in a lot of different ways. It's a common use case. I think it shows off, the power of SharePoint Embedded pretty quickly. I've got a couple of more detailed questions to ask you, if you don't mind, in addition to the lessons learned. Is that okay?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay. So first, what was your technical stack that you used to build the Boulder Innovations demo?
Yeah, that's a good question, Wade. So we use Blazor as the base for the web application.
Okay.
We actually use Blazor on top for some UI elements. We really utilize the graph toolkit for the authorization part towards SharePoint Embedded.
Yeah, and I want to one thing on top of it. You saw the Copilot Embedded chat over there. That is indeed, as Reed mentioned, a React application that runs with TypeScript, but through the power of Vite, we were able to web package it and be able to use it into our Blazor application. Yeah. That means that this component, you can actually use it in any framework at all, as long as it can run JavaScript.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite things about working on developer products and working with developers is the remix aspect of it, right? Almost any component you have, you can remix in some way. And when you first showed me what you did there, I was like, wait a second, this looks different than what I was expecting. But it's so cool that it just gets in there and it just works. So Vincent, let me ask you a question. You are dealing with customers at a different level than technology. A lot of times you're working with business decision makers, C-level executives. You're having a different set of conversations than how does it work and can it work, right? Like, how are leaders thinking about SharePoint Embedded when you're talking about it?
Yeah, that very much depends on, of course, if we're talking to an enterprise customer who wants to have a solution where they want their suppliers or external companies to collaborate with them. It's always been a worry for those situations. If we build something custom, where are we going to store our content? Are we still in control of that content? Right, that's a big scare. You spend a lot of time as a CISO to actually make sure you keep control of all the content of your organization. And now you're building an application to collaborate. Is it now, do I lose control or not? By using SharePoint Embedded, of course, it's now much easier to give that clear focus on, don't worry about the control. It's exactly the same control plane as you was using with your own organization. So it is impossible that your content actually gets out of control, out of your control. If you're building solutions for ISVs, it's the other way around. How do I stay more relevant for those same type of CISO requirements? Those companies that want to use them, they have these requirements as well. By having this option on the table, we can actually allow your users to use our solution, but without losing your control of the documents. As soon as they are uploaded and stored back into your own tenant, you keep control. You stay more relevant. That is definitely a game changer.
Got it. So, it's interesting because when you think about the line of business apps, I think in some ways that's a relatively, I'm going to use the word simple, which, don't hate me, architects and developers of the world, because nothing is ever simple. But like it's kind of simple, right? Because you can keep everything inside the M365 tenant. But it's pretty unique in the ISV world, right? In the ISV world, usually it's a SaaS service. They have, a data center and a cloud solution provider. They're putting those documents someplace that is outside of the M365 tenant. But with SharePoint Embedded, they can keep it there.
Yeah, exactly. So my employees would go and start uploading documents to my SaaS solution that we have a nice contract with. But exactly. So then you always go into this into the privacy risks and all those things associated with it. By keeping it inside my own tenant, that's all covered.
Yeah. That's amazing. Okay, well, thanks again for the great demo. Stick around. We're going to bring you back on camera here towards the end. Congratulations and thank you. Thank you. Steve, I think it's ready to turn over to you. You're going to talk us through how to get started and a bunch of other cool stuff.
Yeah, you bet. All right, thanks, Reed. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of the things that we can do to get started, like Reed said, easily with SharePoint Embedded. Configuring it in your environment and really getting ready to go. The first thing that we need to really think about is, what is that container type? So we need to create that container type in your environment. Again, the container type holds the containers, holds the documents that run your application. A couple ways that we can do that, or a couple types of containers that we really need to understand a little better, right? The trial container type, it is what you think it is. Good for 30 days, easy to configure, get it up and running, put some code in there, put some documents in there, get familiar with it, easy to really get comfortable with what the API can do. Once you're comfortable with that, let's graduate into a standard container. So that standard container, that's the durable container that you're going to use within your production applications. Okay, so that's going to require that Azure subscription so that you know how to bill you or your customers on those transaction costs. And it is going to require some app registration and some Azure plumbing, I call it, that we'll talk about here in a second. And again, to Reed's point earlier about the ISV model, if you have an application that you want to deploy into a customer environment, naturally the documents need to stay in that customer environment for security, compliance purposes there. Great. Create the application in your environment, deploy that container type to your customer environment. Everything is within their boundary. It's using their security model, things like that. But from a billing perspective, you have the option of billing your customers. So as they're consuming that, you can keep track of that on the Azure billing side, send them an invoice. Maybe there's a service fee, some maintenance that you want to include in there as well. Okay. Again, that application management is critical. That's where everything is focused. We're going to walk through specifically what that looks like, what gets created, and what is in that Azure environment that you need to manage and be aware of. And then from the API perspective, once you have that application created, you've got everything you need to start interacting with the APIs. You've got the permission within your Azure environment, and you're able to make those graph calls, integrate that in with your line of business as you would normally see. From there, we got a few admin tools that are available as well. PowerShell, if you are an admin that needs to manage that environment, manage the containers, keep track of the containers and so forth, full PowerShell support there, as you would suspect. SharePoint Admin Center, we're going to walk through that here in just a second to see when an app container type is created. What's it look like in the Admin Center? What can we do in that SharePoint Admin Center? What are some of the things that, those that aren't maybe as technical, PowerShell scares them a little bit? What can they use to manage those containers and container types? Reed mentioned Purview. There is fantastic integration with Purview. If you want to create audit logs to see what activity is going on, e-discovery cases, DLP, sensitivity labels, everything Purview is in your environment that you've got configured. Naturally, you can certainly take advantage of that. And the Graph Toolkit. Can't underestimate enough that that is going to be your best friend. Okay. So I'm going to bail out of the deck here, and the first thing that we want to take a look at is Visual Studio Code. So I mentioned earlier that this is the easiest way to get started. Open up Visual Studio Code, and within the extensions framework, you'll see that SharePoint Embedded extension. Okay, simply click on that, install that. You're going to see the SharePoint Embedded extension on the side rail, and once you connect to your tenant, this is going to ask you typical username and password getting into your tenant. You do need to be a SharePoint admin or the newly created SharePoint Embedded admin to see that information. Once you connect in, you're going to see your containers. Okay, so you're going to see a list of the containers, drill in, manage those containers and so forth. But if you want to create a trial container, all I'm doing is right mouse clicking on that root node, provide a name. Bar's getting in the way, so provide a name for your container and hit go. And you're going to see some statuses that's going to happen in the bottom right on the progress that's being made. It's going to create that app registration. It's going to create the Azure components, the resource group, and so forth that you need to get started. So that's really as simple as it gets. Provide that name, hit enter, and off you go. So let's take a look at what really is created on the back end when that happens. So if we go back into Azure, you'll notice that when I create that container, it's going to create that associated app registration. So this is the critical part that you're going to need. You're going to need that client ID, and you're going to need that tenant ID. Your application is going to have to authenticate. It's going to need that token so that it can interact with the Graph API. Those are two components that you're going to need. Another thing that you will need is that secret. So when you create that secret, make sure and grab that initially because you're not going to be able to get it back. Those are the three components that will allow you to get that token and, again, interact with that Graph API. Okay. From a permissions perspective, notice that we do have the file container.selected permission that is delegated in this case. You can use delegated or application, whatever your preference is. Normally, we recommend delegated permissions because we want to keep track of what activity users are doing. If I'm in there adding and modifying, deleting files, that's going to be captured in the audit log. If I'm granting permission to somebody that needs to get into that container, I want to grant specific permissions to me so that I can get in and do read, edit, access versus someone else who may just need read access or manage some external users, things like that. Okay, so delegated permissions is typically what we're going to see there. And then from a API perspective, this is where we've got some of the authentication. So if you are creating an application, know that there's some redirects that you may need in there as well. Okay. Once you have that app registration completed and registered within SharePoint, go to the SharePoint Admin Center. You're going to see active and deleted containers are now on the left rail in the SharePoint Admin Center. When you click on that container, you're going to see the application that you created. Remember, you can have up to 5 applications. We're in the process of creating, having the ability to support more than that. But within each application, you can have millions of containers. So think of, the example that Delaware used for creating a different project. Consider creating, multiple containers for the project, or each project is going to have its own container. So that's the fine art of container architecture, if you will. But if I click on one of those containers, you're going to see the left panel fly out, and we're going to get some pretty useful information here. Storage used. Okay, so if you're having a project that is focused on containing documents for that one particular area, you can see how much storage is being used, manage that accordingly, and so forth. We're going to grab this container URL. We're going to need that here in a second. But if you go to membership, easy enough to figure out who's got access to what. Notice I do have security groups in there in addition to regular users. So know that you can manage that accordingly and determine what permission they're going to have in that container. Okay. Lastly, sensitivity labels. Back to purview. If you want to secure that container with that sensitivity label, that is a beautiful thing. Okay. So you'll notice I grabbed that container URL, and when I grab that, I'm going to go over to Purview, and really quick, we'll take a look at the audit log. So this is usually one of the more requested features that we try and dig into. When you're creating the audit log, all I'm going to do is simply paste in that site URL. Okay, so think of it, it's a SharePoint site underneath the hood. So what we're going to do, we're going to paste that in there. We're going to run that. I've already done that here, but you'll notice you're going to get audit log activities. So typical things that you would see in the audit log, you're going to see within a SharePoint embedded container. Who did what, when, where. If I click on a particular item, you're going to see all the details that you want to need to do maybe some investigation and so forth into that particular container. Okay. All right. So again, easiest way to get started, use Visual Studio Code, grab that extension that we have in the environment, create yourself a trial container and start using it. Get familiar with the API, and you'll be able to implement that within your applications in pretty short order. So, all right, Reed, with that, I am going to hand it back to you, and we will start to wrap from there.
All right. Well, before you disappear, just stay on camera for a minute. One of the things, Steve, that I really value about working with you is, your depth of knowledge inside the SharePoint online ecosystem. You've been working this for a couple of decades, as you said in your introduction. And I'm curious, as you think about getting started with SharePoint Embedded, do you have to have 2 decades of experience to rock SharePoint Embedded, or what's the learning curve like in your experience?
The learning curve is really the API. When we think of storing documents, we're storing documents, right? I don't want to associate that to a file share, but you've got documents, you've got folders, and you've got metadata that goes on the documents. It's really that simple. How you want to use those within your application, get familiar with the API, know how you want that user experience to be, know how you want them to interact with it, and guide them through that whole journey. That's going to be, like I always say, writing code isn't hard, right?
Right.
Knowing what the user experience should be and anticipating what that business problem is, that's where the hard part comes in usually. So focus on that, get comfortable with the API, and you'll be able to create fantastic solutions from there.
Okay. It's funny, my own experience is that, I came in a little bit as a newcomer to some of the graph toolkit that's out there. And I ended up working on a demo application that, I've shared a few times called SPE Playground. And I did most of that with what today we call vibe coding. I kind of pasted the specs for the API into an LLM and got some results back. And, it's amazing to me how powerful those APIs are, how far you can get without necessarily, having spent a couple of decades in them. But still, as somebody with that level of experience, what's your take? Kind of the same question that I asked Vincent. What's your take on how business decision makers are starting to see SharePoint Embedded versus SharePoint Online?
It's interesting because when you're creating an application that stores documents, don't write your own document management platform, right? That is a very hard thing to do. We make it look easy because we've been doing it a long time. But if you want to scale to millions of documents, if you want to have the feature richness that's in there on version control, co-authoring, I think I saw one time that we have a team of over 80 people at Microsoft that focus on co-authoring, right?
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do. That's their full-time job. And then throw in Purview, right? That's even gets harder. There's an army of folks there too. So we make it look simple. Take that ease of use, put it into your application, and focus on, again, that hard stuff, which is your business problem, right? Let us focus on managing and scaling documents.
The talking point around security is that we might have 80 people working on co-authoring, but we got 1,000 people working on security, and it's even more than that today, to be honest. So it's pretty exciting. So okay, I've got one more common thing I'm going to share, and Team Delaware, if you want to come off camera here for a second as we wrap up, I usually forget to actually share the pricing of SharePoint Embedded. So you can find this online actually at our adoption page. If you just go to aka.ms/SPE adoption. And so our list pricing here is 20 cents per gigabyte per month. And of course we calculate it per day. And it's about 50 cents per 1,000 API transactions and 5 cents per gigabyte of egress. So if you're used to things like Azure Blob Store and how that pricing works, you're going to be very comfortable with this pricing model. And again, you can find that over on the adoption page. Okay, with that last one thing, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And don't worry, as I said in the beginning, we'll go ahead and get all the URLs into the chat over here on the tech community page so that you have those. But, I think there's a couple of things that I always like to talk about, especially as we have, the team from Delaware here. I'd love to have people's take on when is SharePoint Embedded the right solution versus something like a really great cloud object store like Azure Blob Store. So Azure Blob Store, tremendous service, 16 nines of object durability. When you think about like putting an object up there, it's just going to stay there. It's incredible. But why would you use something like SharePoint Embedded instead of Azure Blob Store? I'll open it up to anybody who's got an opinion.
Yeah. Can I have a go first? I think actually what is amazing is, I think like we showed in the demo, is that how many more bells and whistles are around it. So indeed, if you have files that are actually Office native, I think it works really well with SharePoint Embedded. And I think indeed, if you just indeed have other binaries to store, of course you can also do that. But indeed, then maybe indeed a blob storage might be more feasible. But I think indeed the Office integration part is really what makes it really more powerful over actually a blob storage. Yeah,
I think that's the takeaway. When interaction with the content is still part of the use case, this is just a much stronger platform to actually put your content in. As soon as if you store your documents just as a binary for safekeeping for any reason, there will be many reasons still there that are available, or for conversions, or for migrations, or then of course the size of and the scalability of blob storage is still amazing to work with. If you want it even more hidden from your users than SharePoint Embedded already allows, then of course blob storage is still a very, very valid use case as well. But as soon as interaction with the documents are needed, either by using AI, if you want to use your Copilot or your enterprise search, and you want those documents to surface, SharePoint Embedded is a much stronger platform to work with. The collaboration is much stronger. All those features are there, and you don't need to do anything to actually make it work while you're developing your application.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of that stack that's the difference between that raw awesome storage and everything that you actually need kind of on top of interactive documents, from AI to collaboration and compliance and everything that goes with that. So that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. So Steve, let me ask you this question. So one of the things that comes up in any document management project that you do is you have this question of how do you get documents in? And, as we said, this works with both existing apps that have a corpus of content that you need to work with, right? That you want to make better with AI. And then it also works with kind of greenfield applications that start at nothing. How do you think about the process of getting data into a solution like this?
Yeah, so getting data in, I mean, it's a bit of a methodical way of doing it, right? To say you're coming from an existing platform, and is it going to be a lift and shift in? Probably not, right? Because that's the time to do a little house cleaning. It's the time to reorganize a little bit. Because if you've been on a legacy platform for years, you're going to see it, right? It's going to show that you've been on a legacy platform for years. So from that standpoint, you've got a bit of an opportunity, if you will, to clean that up and pull it in and organize it. Organize it so that you are securing it the way that you should, you're exposing it the way and sharing it the way that you should, and scaling it as well, right? I mentioned that you can have millions of containers. Within those millions of containers, you can have millions of documents. That's a good opportunity to start to focus on there. So, yep, and we've got a lot of good partners that will help you migrate that content in, but it's really the planning and the mapping, if you will, on getting it in that's going to make a big difference with your architecture.
Got it. Probably the last thing that I want to talk about a little bit about before we sign off, because it's hard to really overstate this, is just how easy it is to bring Copilot functionality into a SharePoint embedded powered app. All the documents, they go through the same ingestion pipeline. They have the same kind of enterprise characteristics applied to them as you would if it was going into something that's not SharePoint embedded, into the regular SharePoint Online, for example, or OneDrive. To me, the first time that I implemented that chat control, it felt like magic, right? Like that's just kind of the way I look at it. And I think, you guys over at Delaware, you got that control, and then a day later you said we hacked that control, right? Or maybe it was 2 days later, something like that. But like, how did you feel when you first saw it working? Like, we just did the demo like it was nothing,
Yeah, I can tell you for sure about this indeed. So indeed, when we got that Copilot control, that was already, for me personally, feeling of, okay, wow, this is something. But the moment that we figured out that you can give it context, so based indeed on a container, a data package, you can feed it to actually Copilot, and it will actually generate output based on that. That was the moment that I thought, okay, now a new world opens for me.
Yeah, our minds blew up. That was,
That's awesome. Yeah, Steve, I know you've implemented it too. So Steve and I go back and forth, creating these sample apps that we do, and we show them to one another. But when you first got it hooked up, like how long did it actually take you? Because I'm not a React pro, it didn't take me that long. What did you do?
Yeah, so I kind of took a bit of a different approach. As I went to Copilot Studio, and I put in that URL that I showed you, that I put into Purview. And I let it rip, and I'm like, hey, let's let it index the container and let's start to use that. So now I took that, I embedded it into a Power App because that was quick and dirty and easy. And hey, I'm reasoning over the content. I put my project status reports in there, and I'm getting status reports and tasks that I need to do out of there, right? Typical Copilot expectations that I have come to realize and expect, right? So it was super easy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that, I think I'm going to close out our webinar today. Thank you to everybody who has had a chance to join us live, and thank you to everyone who is watching the recording. We hope you found this useful, and if you have any questions, don't forget you can always email us directly at SharePointEmbedded@Microsoft.com. That goes out to Steve, myself, and a bunch of other people here. So thanks again to the team at Delaware. Really appreciate all your help with the great demo. Thank you, Steve, and look forward to talking with you all again on the next SharePoint Embedded webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.